Talk about Fiela. It looks like a really complicated story with all these sort of one family and the other family and one kid who's another kid. But actually, when you get it down to its base, it's actually really simple. In fact, a lot of the story actually takes place over one weekend. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the basic storyline, not all the sort of, for lack of a better word, crap. Um, it's just the basics that you sort of need to know for the exam, and that's it. And then we're going to go through some of the technical aspects, some of the important stuff at the end, but we're going to leave that for the end. So don't worry about that now. So let's do a whistle stop tour through Fiela, and then everything is going to be absolutely fantastic for the exam. And the best place to start is the basic story. So our story starts at a shack in the Knysna forest in around 1860. The exact year is not important yet, it will become important at the end. First person we meet is Elias van Rooyen, and as we meet him, he's coming off a ladder and he's complaining about how sort of bad life is and how the house is damp and the kids have got a cold and blah 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 blah. And we sort of feel sorry for him until we realize exactly what Elias's sort of game plan is. He's a get rich quick guy. He wants to make money without doing as much work as possible. He wants to do the bare minimum but still be as rich as hell. And Elias's sort of ideal way to make money is shooting elephants. There used to be lots and lots of elephants in the Knysna forest. They're not anymore, but back in the old days, there used to be lots and lots of them. So he decides, no, he wants to shoot these. He wants to shoot elephants because he's going to take their tusks off and sell the tusks for the ivory. However, there's two problems, and they came up in a test a couple of years ago. And the first problem is he doesn't have money to buy a rifle or bullets because you need something big to take out an elephant. Hy het nie geld vir 'n geweer of kools nie. That's the first reason. These reasons were one of the questions, as I said, in a test of a couple of years ago. So hy het nie geld vir 'n geweer of kools nie. And the second is he doesn't have a license. You need to actually have a license to do this sort of thing. He doesn't have a license, so he's going to try to do it illegally. So hy het nie 'n lisensie nie. But now, in telling us about this, he shows that and again, this was another question, he shows that he has a lack of education. He's probably illiterate. Because and the question they asked was, give two words that he uses that shows his lack of education. So he says skipper instead of skipper, meaning ships, and he says license instead of license, which means license. So anyway, while all this is happening, Bart basically comes and brings his coffee and sort of he pretends that he's busy, because the thing about Elias is he's as lazy as hell, but he wants to make everybody believe that he's very, very busy when he's really not. So she brings the coffee and she goes away. And then he starts talking about his children. And I think this is a perfect time to meet the Van Rooyen family. So there is little baby Lucas, who will become very important in just a little bit. So let's meet the Van Rooyen. So let's talk about the Van Rooyen family, and there they are. So at the top, we've got Elias van Rooyen. Now, Elias van Rooyen is the patriarch. He's the baas van die plaas. He is a very domineering person. He wants to get his way no matter what. He's not prepared to have people stand up to him. He's prepared to use physical violence to get his wife and kids to obey, and he's terribly abusive. And then we have Bartha van Rooyen. And she is, probably because of the environment she finds herself in, she's a complete ninny. She does not stand up to Elias. She sort of cowers in front of him. She just lets him get away with murder. Well, not literal murder, but I mean, considering what happens, what he does in the story, very, very close enough. Now, let's look, and she's just like a silent person. She just lets things happen. Let's look at the kids. So we've got Willem, Christoffel, Lucas, and Nina. So for the two boys, I've put on the left the age that we first meet them at, and then their age after the time jump. Now, the reason I put Lucas as one of their kids is because the Van Rooyens really did have a kid called Lucas in the beginning of the book. That is certain. What is not certain is what comes later, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. So Willem is the oldest, followed by Christoffel, followed by Lucas, followed by Nina, who, as they say in the book, is nog aan die tyd. So where do they live? Waar bly hulle? They live in die Knysna Bos, in the Knysna forest, in like this little shack thingy, like you see over there. And how do they make a living? Hoe maak hulle 'n lewe? So met balka. So you know those sort of beams that you have, those wooden beams that you have in the house and your floorboards. They do that. So they cut down trees and they saw them and they make them into beams, which they then sell. Although Elias would much rather make money killing elephants because he thinks that's easier. But now let's talk about the elephants quickly. It's a superstition in the forest that if you say the word olifant, the olifant is going to hear you and come after you. So they call it die grootvoete, because it's calling it a Bigfoot, because they don't want to say the name elephant. So if you ever see grootvoet, it just refers, or grootvoete, it just refers to elephant because it's a superstition of the Bosmans, of the forest people. So while this is all going on, while Elias is on his sort of merry way, Bartha realizes that Lucas is missing. And she goes and talks to Elias and she says, have you seen Lucas? And it's not that Elias doesn't care. He's just not really interested. He's more interested in what he is doing. And he just says, oh, just go look properly. Go look properly. Go ask Tant Marley and Tant Anna and Sophie and go ask all of those people. But then it becomes, and there is, let me show you. There is Tant Marley on the left, and there is Tant Anna on the right, who are neighbors of the Van Rooyens, because there's lots and lots and lots of people that live in this community. But Elias wants to be seen to be busy. He's lazy as hell, but he wants to be seen to be doing something. So he's like, leave me, I'm busy, I'm working. He's not really concerned now about the fact that the kid's gone missing. But then when it becomes clear that the kid has gone missing, he sort of blames everybody. He blames Bartha and he blames the two young boys. And then finally he starts saying, okay, now we're going to look. And he gets together this search party. And the problem is, they don't know where the hell the boy's gone. And the problem is also with Tant Marley. Because Tant Marley, and I'll show you now Tant Marley. This is Tant Marley over here. And Tant Marley is what they call in Afrikaans a doemprofeet. She's a prophet of doom. Now the kid's gone missing, she is immediately going to the worst possible scenario. Just like her, she's like, oh, this sounds like my my deceased aunt in Karatara in Karatara's forest, who also lost her kid this way. And she tells all of these horrible stories about similar cases and really starts freaking and about Flipper Lorenz and all of these people. And Elias is like, no, don't worry, we're going to find him. he's just hiding. So Tant Mali, who you can see, and Tant Gerki in the yellow dress, they start to get everybody ready, and there's this whole search party, and they're going to do this thing where they're walking, where they walk in a wheel of 8 to try and find this little Lucas. And now they're worried about the Grootvoet, the elephants, but Elias is like, no, it's not a problem. They're in Gunnesebos, which is like a neighboring part of the wood, and they go and look, but the problem is the mist. Now the mist is very important, because the mist, let me draw some mist, means that they cannot see in front of them, and they can't find the boy. And now this number over here, and I'm going to put it in very big highlight, this number here, 8, nummer 8. Usually they're going to ask how long did they wait before basically deciding that they could not find Lucas. 8 dae. 8 dae. They, the constable came to say that he's afraid that Lucas could not be found. He said he couldn't, there's no way a baby or like a 3-year-old kid could survive on its own for 8 days in the middle of the forest. And then 8 months later, 7 months later, 7 maanden later. So 7 months later, in Augustus of 1865, they find a little body next to the Gouwe Rivier. So remember, they thought the elephants were in Gunnesebos. Now, just remember, the forest is called Gunnesebos, and the river is called Gouwe Rivier. But now they found a skeleton next to the Gouwe Rivier, a little skeleton, and they think it could be Lucas, but it could also be a baboon. And so this is happening in the Knysna Forest. At the same time this is all happening, on the other side of the mountain, in the Lange Kloof, at the house of the Kumutis, a little baby turns up on the back door. Now, something very, very important. There is no indication in the book ever that, well, no, there's no sort of written thing in the book ever that the baby that ends up on the Kumuti's doorstep, Benjamin, is the same baby that went missing from the Van Rooyens. There's no indication of that ever, but we're going to get into that later. So, as I said earlier, the reason I put Lucas on the Van Rooyen family tree is because they really did have a baby called Lucas. That is certain. What is not certain is the baby that turned up at the Kumutis the real Lucas van der Rooyen? That we do not know. We do know that the Van der Rooyens really did have a kid, and the kid really did disappear. So now let's meet the Kumuti family. Now, at the top, we've got Seling Kumuti. Now, Seling Kumuti is basically almost like Bart de van Rooyen. Well, not quite, but they're both similar in that they're quite quiet, because Fiela Kumuti is very loud. She is the boss van die plaas. She completely controls everything, and he lets her do it, because yes, she's very strict. She's strict, but the difference between her and Elias is abusive. He's malicious. He sort of cares about himself more than his own family. Fiela has got the interests of her family completely at heart. It's everything she does is for her family. And she's very domineering, and she's got a loud voice, she's very strict, but because of the area that they live in, she's got to be strict because everybody's got to pull their weight. So they've got 4 biological kids. They've got Emma, they've got Kitty, they've got David, and they've got Tori. And then we've got Benjamin Kumuti. Now, the reason I do not put him as a connected kid is he's not a blood relation. That we know. He is white, the Kumutis are colored. He cannot be biologically related to them. Oh, and by the way, that is a very important term to know. Who are the biologische ouers, biological parents? Because that sometimes does come up in the tests. So we know that they're not biologically related. But Benjamin is Fiela and Seling's, let's write it down, Hanskind, which is a foster child. And that comes from Hans Lam, which is basically when a lamb would die, when a lamb's mother rejected it or died, another sheep would take over raising that lamb. So Benjamin is Fiela se Hanskind, which is basically foster child. So where do they live? So they live on a farm called Wolvekraal, and the area that this farm is found in is called Die Lange Kloof. So it's very important. Know the farm is called Wolvekraal, and the area is called Lange Kloof. And we're going to get into exactly how they got this farm in a little bit. So they live Wolvekraal in die Lange Kloof, and there's their farm. Hoe maak hulle 'n lewe? Very different to the Van der Rooyens, because they actually work very, very hard. Elias van der Rooyen just wants everything to come to him. The Kumutis, particularly Fiela, she's prepared to work for everything that she has got. So they do a bietjie quering. So they do a little bit of crops. Quering is like wheat and stuff like that. Bietjie mealies, so they plant a little bit of mealies. Bietjie groente, a little bit of vegetables. They keep a few sheep and melkbok, which is basically almost like a goat. And then Seling brei velle. So in those days they used to make shamboks out of either cattle hide or rhino hide or elephant hide. So he would braid, is if you braid something, you almost braid it. So he would braid the skins into whips, sweeper and karvatsa, which they used to trade. It's in their area. It's very much interdependent. It's a bartering system. I'll give you soap if you can give me this, and so on. In the forest, it's not so much like that, but where Fiela lives, it's very, very much like that. Okay, so now we know a little bit about the Kumutis, and everything is going sort of hunky-dory. Now we fast forward 9, and we are at the farm, and we got Fiela and Seling there, and basically Fiela gives a little bit of a description about how, as I said earlier, how they make their money and how they make a living. And Seling notices this this paardkar, this horse and cart, and this horse and cart has been in the area for some time, and Fiela doesn't really care. She thinks that they're either predikers, so they're preachers, or they are looking to buy stuff. And again, in this book particularly, it's important to know details. So who is the salesman that they deal with? They deal with Rusinski. And if they're going to sell to this paardkar, how much are they going to sell for? They're going to sell the fella for 2 olap a piece. So that happens. And Fiela is getting, she's getting a little bit irritated because she doesn't really care about this bad guy. Seling is watching and he's like, it's been in the area for days. What the hell does it mean? And basically, the kids are playing, and then so Benjamin is doing his thing. He's playing around. The ostriches are doing their thing, and then the guys arrive, and they are not predikers or wanting to buy stuff. They are census opnemers. They are census people. Die lange en die dikke. Those are their names. And it's so one is very tall and one is very fat. Now the reason they're called die lange en die dikke is probably because Fiela would never have had permission to address them as a colored woman by their names. Or it's either that, or she did not. So sy sou nie toestemming gehad het om hulle op hulle name te noem nie. Or they didn't tell her their names. So you just call them die lange en die dikke. So they come, and now she starts getting a little bit they're starting to get Fiela's starting to get a little bit nervous because Benjamin and his brothers and sisters have been running after the ostriches. Now the two ostriches are the female is Polly. Sorry, my handwriting is very, very, very bad. The female is Polly, and the male is Skopper. Again, very important to know little details like names. So the kids are running after the ostriches, and now the census people come. Now Fiela's getting nervous. She's getting nervous. And she's very sort of arrogant with them. She treats them with disdain. She's like, wat is baas julle se besigheid? And now they say census. Now she goes, oh my God, now we've got a problem. And she wants to sort of get them out of there as soon as possible. She doesn't even give them chairs. So now they start asking questions because they want to know certain things. And like full name, date of birth. Now, Seling is quite a bit older than Fiela, and he does not know details about his birth based on the time period we are dealing with here. He could have been, and this is just sort of based on something I read online, and this is not very important, but he could have been a former slave based on the time period. It is possible, because he says he was born when die skepe gekom het, die Engelse skepe, so he could have been born when the 1820 settlers arrived. Now Fiela knows her details a lot more, and it shows that she's very educated. So she gives all of these details, and when the kids were born and when she was born, when they got married. Side note, most of the kids were born before she was actually married to Seling, so they had them out of wedlock. So then they ask, how did you get this farm? And remember, the farm is called Wolvekraal, and Fiela says her father and grandfather worked for a family called the Weimeyers. Now the Weimeyers are neighbors of the communities. They're one of the neighbors. The others are Pieter Zondag, who will become important later, and the Lagans. And now the Lagans are basically white trash. But so they got the land from the Weimeyers, and Fiela is very proud of having her own land. And she says, oh, if you want to go and look, the erfbrief, so the title deed, is with Mr. Cairncross in Uniondale. And basically, Fiela, while she's sort of talking to these people, she is praying to God that Benjamin stays away from the house. And basically, they want to know all the people in the house, and she tells them what they do for a living and who their church is, And then, for lack of a better word, the shit hits the fan. Because Benjamin arrives with his little boat, let's say Skyki, and Fiela is praying. She basically, in the beginning, so she has two prayers. First prayer is when the census people first arrive, and she says, if the wyfie wil net uitbreek en die kinders moet daar agterna. So the two prayers are basically, first one when the people arrive and she realizes that they're census people. She says, if the female ostrich would just break out, as sy wil net uitbreek, and then the kids have to run after her and they don't have to see the census people. That's the first one. So she's getting like a little bit worried, but not desperate. Now Benjamin has shown up in front of these people, and it's very clearly a white kid. So now she's absolutely desperate. So she says, Here, vat alles. And she's a very religious woman. She says, vat die hele lot, but don't take Benjamin. Benjamin's arrived to show his mom his ship. And die lange and die dikke are completely shocked. This is a white kid, and this is a colored family. Who the hell is this kid? And they ask Fiela who's the kid, and she's like, no, it's mine. And then basically asks all of the details about how this kid turned up. She's like, he turned up at my house 9 years ago, and just at the back door, and then they do this whole sort of to and fro about how Benjamin ended up there, and both the census people, particularly in this case, die dikke, particularly in this case, die dikke, basically say, why the hell have you kept this kid? Because in those days it was against the law. So they say, why didn't you take the kid to various people? And it's important to know who the people are. So the first person they say she should have taken it to was Pieter Zondag, who is her neighbor. He lives on the big farm, and she said no, he was agter by die see. He was away at the sea. Then they said, why did you not take it to the magistrate? And she's like, magistraat wat waar was. There was no magistrate. Then they're like, what about the falconet? And we're going to talk about falconets in a little bit. She's like, what falconet? The falconet wasn't in the area. And she's like, okay, how is it okay for colored kids to be on white farms but not for white kids to be on colored farms? He's like, no, it's not okay. He's like, it's not okay, it's against the law. So they're like, we are going, and she's like, he's attached to me, we're not going to give him up. And they're like, oh yeah, we are going to take him. We're going to take him, and there's basically nothing that you can do. You lied to us. And she then starts begging. So they go away, and and then we see there's like, Fiela doesn't really pay attention because time goes by, months and months and months go by, and then we hear that Elias has got trapped. He's got beaten up by an elephant, and which is good because he completely deserves it. And then a couple months later, they're back, and they're like, we are going to take him to Neisner to go and see the magistrate, Mr. Goldsbury. And Fiela's like, okay, fine, but I will come with you, because they tell her about Bartha van Rooyen lost her kid in the forest, and the magistrate wants to see this kid because there's a chance that it could be her kid. Fiela doesn't really believe this nonsense, but she says, okay, come, let's do it. I will come with you. No, they say, you can't. There's no space. So she's like, I will walk. and then I will bring him, then come back. She's like, and now this is where she catches them out. She says, they're like, oh, it'll take you far too long with this boy to get to court, because this now exchange is happening on the Wednesday, and they want to see him on the Friday. And she's like, okay, but hold on, how come we can't get there in 2 days walking, but a little kid of 3 can? They don't really pay attention to this. And they're like, okay, you've got to bring him. So we're going to come and get him tomorrow morning. And so what Fiela does is she gets Lucas ready, and she packs him a trommel. Now, this is a trommel. Trommel is a trunk. And she packs him a trommel to take to Neisner, just for his stay there. Because basically the thing was, he's going to go to court on the Friday. It's not going to be the kid, and then they're going to come back on the Saturday. So she packs him a couple of things. First thing she packs him is money, 5 shillings. And this is very important to know what's in the trommel. 5 shillings. To show that the Kumutis is nie kaal gat nie, that they're not broke. Second thing, a slaaphemp, a sleeping shirt, like pajamas. Third thing, sy beste broek, his best pants. Fourth thing, a nuwe hemp that he can wear in court. But we're going to get into the color of the hemp in a little bit, of the shirt in a little bit. David's the best bikie, so his brothers lent him his best jacket. Everybody's trying to get him ready. And then a flanny hemp, like a flannel vest, so that he can stay warm. And she gives him all these instructions that he must call the judge wel eerder hier, and all those things like that. So then the Lang and Dikke come and they take him, and again, remember this whole thing was taking place on the Wednesday. Now 2 days later, they're in court with Mr. Goldsbury in Neisner. And what Mr. Goldsbury does is he puts Benjamin in front, in amidst some other boys. You can see Benjamin in the middle there, and then gets Bartha and Elias van Rooyen and says to Bartha, take your time, we want you to make the right choice. And Bartha picks immediately, and she picks the one in the middle, but she's in tears, and there's a very good reason for Bartha being in tears, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. So now Lucas is like, ek is Benjamin Kumuti, Fiela is my ma, Seling is my pa, they're my parents. These random people are not my parents, because basically what the Lang and the Dikke had thought was that the Kumutis were basically keeping Benjamin captive, and that he would take any chance to leave. That was not the case at all. He really loved being there. So now he doesn't want to go with these people. And the judge is like, no, you're going, they're your parents, this proves it. So they go off now, the Neisner Forest. So they do their whole walk thing, and Lucas is now Benjamin has now become Lucas again. They get back, and now we meet Marley and Gertjie and Sophie, and everybody is sort of a little bit oh my god, Lucas is back. And but now Lucas still believes that he is Benjamin Kumuti, and Elias is getting really pissed off with this, and Bart is like, no, he's just going to adapt, and then once he's adapted, it's going to be fine. So he gets introduced to all his new brothers and sisters, Willem, Christoffel, and everybody. But the important thing is Nina, because she tries to be friendly to him in a certain way. She says, well, yeah, patat here. And now the whole patat thing is because the last thing that the real Lucas was seen doing was eating a potato. And it also shows that nothing has changed for the Van Rooyens in the whole 9 years, because they're still eating only potatoes. They are still poor. So she offers him a potato. He doesn't want it. He just calls him Macy-Kint. He's not interested. But now he she he realizes that she can maybe help him get out of there. So she takes him to go to the forest. He, he he's like, do you know the road back? Do you know the die harde pad? Now they call it die harde pad because it's the hard road. It's not tarred, but it's sort of gravel, and it's called Diep Wallisse pad. And she is basically going to take him. He wants her to take him to Diep Wallisse pad so that he can walk home back to the Lange Kloof and back to Fiela. That is what he wants. She's like, okay, I will take you, but I want to show you my secret first. And he's a little bit worried about the elephants, and they have this whole exchange. She's like, you are not really Lucas. I mean, you're not really Benjamin, because how can you be, how can that Fiela Kumuti be your mother? She's colored, you're white, she can't be your actual mother. Nina believes that this boy is really Lucas, but she always says, yes, Lucas wat weggeraak, you Lucas that disappeared. She really believes that he's Lucas, but she will humor him because she wants a sort of friend, and she takes him into the forest, and he really wants to run away. She's like, no, you can't, because that woman's not your mother. She's colored, you're white, that can't be. My parents are your parents, don't go. And he sort of says, okay, and she like sort of f's around with him a little bit by playing tricks on him, and he's like, okay, please take me. So she agrees to take him, but first she wants to show him her secret, and her secret is these bottles that she's either found or stolen. And the soetolie bottle, which is this like olive oil bottle, which is this one over here, and it's very important to know what the bottles are and where she got them, because they are very important. So the soetolie bottle and the two blue bottles said opgetel, so she picked them up. And the kreefie, which is sort of like a square bottle, which is this one over here, she stole from Tangertjie. Now these bottles are important because they represent her sense of she likes magic. It's like her dream. She just wants to dream. She believes in the fairies and the magic of the forest. So they play with the bottles a little bit because she can mimic birds with them. And then she then shows him the road. She tries to convince him not to go, and she gets back home, and Elias is already in a bad mood because he wants Nina to work. He thinks she buggers around too much in the forest, and he wants her to work. And Bart is like, no, she does work. She like shovels in the garden. So Elias is like, nonsense. Now Nina gets home, and Lucas is gone. And now this is a problem because Nina has made a deal with Lucas. She showed him the road, or she let him escape, in exchange for that 5 shillings. So she could buy a mondfluitjie, like a harmonica. That's again important. What is the deal? The deal is, hy sal vir haar 5 shillings gee, 5 shillings, in exchange for showing him the road. So she can buy a mondfluitjie and a kombers, because when Elias got trampled on by the grootvoete, he lost the blanket. So now he's basically, Benjamin has disappeared, and now Benjamin's gone on the road back to die Lange Kloof. Now Elias is very pissed off. He now wants to go and get him. So he goes and chases him with an osrim, with like a shambok. Meanwhile, it is now it's now Saturday, and the kid has Benjamin has not come back to Fiela. Remember, she still knows him as Benjamin. So she walks to the magistrate's office, and she arrives there 2 days later, so basically on the Monday. And she tries to get in. They won't let her in the front door because she's white. I mean, she's non-white rather. Excuse me, she's non-white. But she does get let in the back door with this cleaner. And he basically, the cleaner sort of is cheeky to her and says the magistrate is op die bank, which basically means he's on the bench, he's in session, and can't speak to her. And she's like, call somebody, I don't want to deal with you, you're the cleaner, call like a policeman. So the constable comes, the constable. And she basically says, okay, where the hell is my child? He was taken away, and he was supposed to come back on the Saturday. It's now the Monday. Where is he? And the constable tells her basically, oh, his real mother has taken him back. Cheers, bye. Die saak is afgehandel. And a very important thing she says is, die saak is afgehandel. So she says, afgehandel verby soos afsterf sonder groet. So soos afsterf sonder groet. Please just don't think I'm giving anything that's not important. The stuff that I am saying is all stuff that I have seen in past papers. So soos afsterf sonder groet basically sums up her feeling, because afsterf means to die, and if something afsterf sonder groet, for her it's almost as if Benjamin has died, because she doesn't know if she's going to see him again, and it's like he died without saying goodbye. So at the same time, we are now in the forest, and Lucas is running away. And oh, by the way, I refer to the same guy as either Benjamin or Lucas based on the point of view. So if it's from the Van der Rohen's point of view, he's Lucas, and if it's from the Kamuji's point of view, he's Benjamin. So Lucas is now running in the forest, and Elias is chasing him, and he beats the shit out of him, for lack of a better word. And he basically beats him into admitting, or sort of saying, okay, I'm Lucas van der Rohe, you guys are my family, and then takes him home, and then gets really, really angry with Nina, because he was still angry with her, and he didn't want her to play in the forest, and she snuck out, and he basically chopped all her hair off, which shows how abusive he is. So after getting turned away, Fiela's not going to give up so easily, and she goes back, and now this time she sees the magistrate, and she tells him about Koning Salomo. Again, this is very important because this is the Bible story, and if you remember anything from this one sort of sermon, again, my handwriting is very very bad. So Koning Salomo, King Solomon, and she basically brings up this story to highlight the injustice and the way she's been treated. So basically what happened was King Solomon was a so Koning Solomon was a king of Israel in the biblical times, and he was very, very wise, and two women come to him claiming the same baby, and the one says, this is my child, the other woman's baby died in the night, now she's claiming mine. Both women are telling the exact same story, and King Solomon doesn't know whom to believe, and so he says, alright, cut the baby in two. One mother must get each half. So one mother gets a half, and then the other mother gets the other half. One mother is like, okay, let's do it, and the other mother says, no, let her have him. And he realized that the mother who was prepared to give her kid up in order to save his life was the real one. So Fiela's like, okay, if you are she basically thinks of the judge as King Solomon, Queen Solomon, because he's making the same decision. But she's like, why did you let Barta come and look at the kid and not have me there as well? Basically, the reason is because she's white, and the magistraat, who is the magistrate, he's not interested in whatever Fiela has to say. He basically says, if you keep causing trouble, I will have you arrested. So go away. So she goes away. At the same time this is happening, the law goes and checks up on Elias. Elias and Barta are there, and they are being very charming to Mr. Cup. So this guy is Mr. Cup, and he is the boswachter. So he's like the forest ranger, and he has been asked by Mr. Goldsby to go and check up on Lucas, and to see, is he coping, is he adapting, how is he doing? Because yes, it was terrible that they were taking the kid away from Fiela, but they still wanted him to. So Mr. Goldsby still wanted him to sort of adapt well and be okay. So he sends Cup, who's the boswachter, to go and check up on Lucas, basically like the old-fashioned version of Child Protective Services. But now the problem is, Elias has been abusing Lucas. He's been beating him to a pulp. So he doesn't want Mr. Cup to see this, because not so much because he feels guilty. He doesn't want to get into trouble. He doesn't want to get arrested. And so he's very charming. He gets Mr. Cup to go away, which is okay. And then basically that is the end of that bit. Now we fast forward again 7 years after this happened, and we see this ox wagon, and we see Nina, and Nina is furious. Why is Nina so mad? Because Elias has finally got her a job. She is now going to go and be a kinderopasser. So she has been sort of hired by an English family in town to be a kinderopasser, which is a child minder. So she's basically going to be a nanny. So Nina has got 3 jobs. The first one is being a nanny. Kinderopasser. So my handwriting, again, as I said, is very, 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 very bad. And by this time, Benjamin has sort of not forgotten about Fiela, but he's sort of accepted being Lucas van Rooyen. The last time he had heard about Fiela was when he heard that she came to bring his stuff. So Elias had seen her, but had not let Lucas see her. So that was 7 years previously, and now he's sort of now accepted that he's Lucas van der Rooyen. So he now has to escort Nina to her job, because Elias is worried that she's going to run away. And Nina's like, oh, please don't make me do this. Please don't make me do this. But anyway, so she goes and does it. But she's very unhappy. So what happens? She runs away. Completely predictable. She runs away from her job. So Lucas is sent to go and get her. In Niza, she'd go and find it, put her back to work, because Elias is taking all of her money. So on the way there, he sees all of these people, and he wonders where they're going. And he hears about a spookskip. Now, a spookskip is not like a ghost ship. It's basically like a ship without a crew. And he hears about it at Nutsi. So he takes a slight detour, and he ends up in Nutsi, which is like an area near Nyasa, a little coastal area near Nyasa. And he starts talking to this guy on the side of the harbor who is Falconet Armstrong. And this is where we meet Falconet Armstrong. And a falconet in those days was basically like the local law enforcement of sorts. And it's from Falconet Armstrong that we hear not only more about this spookskip, but we also hear about John Ben for the first time. And Lucas starts thinking more and more about the sea. But he has to put that to one side because he has to now go find Nina. So he has got to, as I said, put all of that aside because now he ends up at the Weatherby house. And this is Miss Weatherby, and she is now basically Nina's second employer. And now Nina is working as a bediende. So in the beginning, she worked as a kinderoppasser. Now she is a bediende, but now she's not going under Nina working for this Miss Weatherby. She's going under, now a bediende is basically like a servant. She's no longer a kinderoppasser, she's now a servant. It's very important to know what she does. So first she's a kinderoppasser, now she's a bediende, which is a servant. But she's now going under Christina, which basically shows us that she does not want people to find her. And Lucas comes back and he tries to explain to Miss Weatherby who he is and that he's Nina's brother and that he's come to sort of make sure she's okay. But the thing that Miss Weatherby doesn't like is the fact that Lucas is going to take Nina's money. And she's like, Lucas tries to explain to her, oh, in the forest we do things differently. Everything goes in one pot. She doesn't like that. So basically he goes to Nina, obviously to find her, but to ask her a favor. He asks her to go home to tell Elias that he is not coming back to the forest. He's finished with the forest. So now two kids have left the nest. Nina is now a servant, and Lucas has gone as well. Now, where does Lucas end up? Lucas ends up by the sea again, and he ends up by a little shack. And it's here we meet Khalil September. And Khalil September is carrying a bunch of planks, and Lucas comes and says he wants to learn to row. Now, who is Khalil September? Khalil September is basically a sailor. Well, he wants to be a sailor, but he has got a lazy eye. Now, back in those days, it was considered bad luck for a ship to have a sailor with a lazy eye. So they would not hire him, and so he had to work for John Ben in say Rooispan. Now, who is John Ben? John Ben lives above Khalil in the lighthouse, and he is the Lewis. He's the pilot. So think about like a natural harbor. So let's draw us a harbor. So this would be the harbor, and this would be the harbor, and then there would be the ocean over here, and the ships would be coming in, but obviously there'd be lots of rocks. So you would have your lighthouse over here and your Lewis, so your pilot, which would basically shine the light and show various flags to get the ships to come in and not hit the rocks. And they would have a rooispan, so a Lewitsboot, so a lifeboat, and they would hook it onto the ship and they would row the boat into the harbor. So that's what John Ben did, and Khalil worked for him. And Benjamin is like, okay, I want to learn to row. Khalil's like, ach, not so fast, sonny boy. You're a boss man. You do not have soap in your blood. But what I will do, he says, is I will give you a job taking out oysters for me, because I will pay you to do all of like fishing for me and skinning buck and all that stuff, because I don't want to do that, but I still need to make money like that. So I can't teach you to row because you don't have the salt in your blood, but I will let you do that. Take oysters uithaal, bokkers a orchestral and stuff like that. So that happens, and we then get back from Nina. So Nina has gone back to the boss, and she has told Elias and Barta that he's not coming back. And they have this joyous reunion, and here comes problem. Because Lucas starts feeling physically attracted to Nina, and he doesn't like that because she's his sister. So she tells him, and that's incest. So she tells him that no, she's gone back to the forest, but not only has she gone back to say goodbye, she's gone to go look at her bottles and her monflakey, and everything is sort of rusted over, and the bottles are full of dirt, and the monflakey is damaged. And that basically just symbolizes the fact that her dreams are finished. She's going to be a servant. But now she's no longer a servant. She's gone back to Miss Weatherby. She's no longer a bediener. She's now a companion. And that's basically, there's no Afrikaans word for it. And that's the way, like you can basically just say a metgezel. She's a companion. But that's the way they refer to it in the book, as a companion. So remember, very important, what are the three things that she does? So it's very important to remember what she does. So Nina is first a kinder. So number one, she's a kinderoppasser. Then number two, so then she runs away from that. Then she goes and works for Miss Weatherby as a bediende, a servant. Then number three, she goes back to Miss Weatherby, and now she's a companion. But now, when she has this reunion with Lucas, she comes and says, a guy was looking for you, and his name was Laiki van Baas Petrus. Now that's Petrus Zondag. And Petrus Zondag had tried to help the Kumutis find Benjamin. But now the news that Fiela, that Laiki van Baas Petrus brings is that David is dood. Now, even though Benjamin or Lucas had not seen the Kumutis in years and years and years, he remembered David. So now David is gone. So now he realizes he needs to go home. He needs to go back to the Lange Kloof to see the Kumutis. So now David is gone. So he now goes and gets a little bit of fish. Now Nina can't understand why he's so attached to David, because for her Lucas is Lucas. He's not the Kumutis. Why the hell should he care about them? Benjamin / Lucas realizes he needs to go home. So he goes home, and we see Fiela and Selang, and they're much older, and Selang is now battling to walk. And Fiela's like, no, you must walk, you must walk, you must walk. The doctor said you must walk. Next thing, boom, out of the blue, here comes Benjamin. He comes back home. And Fiela and Selang are so shocked. And Fiela particularly, because she's like, this boy that left me is now a big man. Not only is a man, he's a white man. And she's reluctant to sort of go over and hug him, because she doesn't know what his experiences have been in the past 7 years. Will he see her as his mother, or will he see her as just like as the Van Rooyens saw her, like brainfoul, just like a colored woman, sort of inferior? But he calls her Ma, and it's at that point she realizes that he still thinks of her as his mother. So he gets back, and it's more it's breathed life into Selang, and he's teaching him how to row, and things are going on weeks and weeks are going by, and Benjamin is not happy, and Fiela can see that, and he doesn't know who he is. He, he really doesn't know. And Fiela says to him, "Who do you feel like in your heart? Who do you feel like in your heart?" And he says, um, he doesn't know, because he is in love with Nina, and he asks her, "Who do you think I am?" And she says, "Jy is die weggooi lam wat die Here aan my toe betrou het. You are the sort of lost sheep that God entrusted to me." And she says to him, "Who do you feel like? Um, Benjamin van Rooyen or Lucas, Lucas van Rooyen or Benjamin Kumiji? Who do you feel like? Are you Lucas van Rooyen or Benjamin Kumiji?" He says, "When I came back here, I felt at home," but he didn't say. And she then tells him about her plan. She's like, she's gotten rid of the Lagan, she's bought their land, and she's going to give the land to Benjamin. Benjamin doesn't want it. He's like, "No, that's Tolly and Kitty and Emma's grond." And Fiela's like, "No, I can do with the land what I want." David is dead. Tolly is now in jail because he's stabbed someone. And Kitty and Emma are girls, they can't farm anyway, she said. So if Tolly stops being drunk, he's gonna have Wolverkaral, but you are gonna have this new land that I bought. Because she knows that even though his family, he can't live with them forever because he's white, they're colored. So she's made provision for him. And it just shows the difference between her and Elias. Elias doesn't plan. Fiela has always got a plan. She's always planning ahead. So basically, then what happens is Benjamin tells her that he's in love with Nina. Say sister, he says. Now Fiela, even though Benjamin doesn't like this, Fiela takes it as a good omen of sorts, because she says, okay, if you love her, blood can't love blood in the way that you love Nina. So that must mean that she's not your sister. And the way she says is, bloed so bloed gekeer, like blood would have stopped blood. So she said, but if you really want to know who you are, there's one person that can tell you. So he says, who? He says, Bartha van Rooyen. Now we're getting somewhere. Now, Benjamin or Lucas now goes back to the boss to see Bartha van Rooyen. And Elias is now in sort of almost like a coma, sort of really injured state. Why is Elias in a coma? Because the elephants got him again. The bastard deserves it. So he's there. And Bartha is basically doing all of the work on her own. And he comes back, he brings meat for them from Fiela. And that just shows what a nice person Fiela is. Because she is looking out for the woman who took her kid away from her. And Lucas asks his mom, who am I really? She's like, you are a Van Rooyen. Yes, a Van Rooyen. I picked you out in court. You are a Van Rooyen. You always have been. You always will be. And basically, he does not admit. She does not admit to the fact that she lied. And which is a bad thing, because she's obviously feeling very guilty. And she's like, jy's my kind, wie anders is jy? And so Lucas goes away, but he's not finished with it yet because he's realized that she's something's up. So then he and Nina are on the beach and they have a little bit of a fight. And after this fight, they sort of, because basically what happens is Lucas doesn't know who the hell he is. He doesn't know what he's feeling for Nina. So he basically thinks, okay, it's better if we don't see each other. And Nina gets all offended. And they have this fight. But anyway, so what happens is we now go back. Now Lucas goes for the second time back to the boss, and the whole family is there, and he confronts Barta again, and this whole thing happens, and Barta is sort of like out of the blue. She starts sort of looking very ill, and she drops the bombshell. This is what we've been waiting for the whole story. So highlight this. She says the exact words she uses are "Ek het die verkeerde kind gevat." She took the wrong kid. And Lucas, or Benjamin, is absolutely platgeslaan. He can't believe this. And Elias is also quite shocked because it seems that he didn't know. He didn't really care. He sort of didn't really care. And she says, no, when we got into court, Die Lange met die bril, remember that Die Lange's got bril, said, choose the one met die blauwe hempie. Because remember, she was put, there was like a police lineup, and basically Barta was told who to choose. And it turns out that the reason Barta was crying was because at that point she knew that her real Lucas was dead and that she was doing something really, really wrong. And they found her real boy, Lucas, langs die Homtini rivier. And he basically starved to death. So, and look, and it's basically, remember, it's very important to know who was it. It was Die Lange Mehibral. So it's Die Lange that told Barta who to choose, and Lucas or Benjamin cannot believe this. He's like, the words of one man changed my entire life. And basically, he then decides he leaves the Van Rooyens. He's no longer Lucas Van Rooyen, and he goes back to his boss, John Ben. He says to him, Ek is Benjamin Kumuti. That is his decision. And that is how the story ends. And I know we've gone for long, and you have got such sort of patience, and I am so proud of you so far. And we are nearly done. There's just some important things we need to talk about. Important. So if you're a little tired, take a little bit of a break, and then come back, because we've only got 4 slides left to do. And this is such important stuff for tomorrow. So, and for any Fiela test. So the first thing is Tate. The difference between vertelde tyd and vertel tyd, because sometimes they ask that question. So vertelde tyd is basically the time period something is set in. Is it set in the 1900s? Is it set in the 2000s? That's the time period that the thing is set in. So in this case, the story takes place from 1865 to 1882. Because remember what happens is, let's just summarize the story. 1865, 3-year-old Lucas, the real Lucas, disappears. Baby turns up on the Kumuti's doorstep. Things go fine for 9 years, which takes you, my maths is very bad, to about 18 sort of 74-ish. Then census people come. They take Lucas away. He goes and lives with the Van der Rohens for 7 years. And then the story ends in 1882. So that is the vertelde tyd. That is the time period in when it is taking place. And obviously they can't make the play 15 years long, or however long it is. So they have something called tydspronge. Now it's very important to know what a tydspronge is. A tydspronge is a time jump, and they will usually do this through like changing a scene. So tydspronge. So for an example of a time jump would be the 9-year jump between the time that Benjamin arrives at Fiela. So he arrives at Fiela when he's about 3 years old, and the time that the census people come. So that would be like 1865 to 1874. So they suddenly jump from 1865 to 1874. And the story with all the time jumps makes for verteltyd. Now, verteltyd is the running time of the drama, which is 2 hours. So they compress 15 years, or however many years, how many years is it? It's about 17 years into 2 hours through the use of tydspronge, time jumps, and also tydsverloop. Now, tydspronge are big time jumps. Tydsverloop is sort of small ones, like changing of a scene in the same sort of like next day sort of thing, to show like sunrise showing a new day, and then the sun setting, and then the next day. So it's short sort of showing the progression of time. So that's tydsverloop, like the sun moving one day from sunrise to sunset. Tydsprong is much bigger. So vertelde tyd is the time period it's taking place. Verteltyd is the time it takes them to tell the story. So in this case, it's 2 hours long, if that makes sense. So remember, vertelde tyd, time period. Verteltyd is how long it takes them to tell the story. And vertelde tyd is made possible. They shorten the time from like 16 years into 2 hours because of tydsverloop, which is a short thing, and tydspronge, which you see a lot more of, which is a big time jump. For example, the 9 years and then the 7-year jump. So now we're going to talk about conflict. There's a lot of conflict in this book. The first conflict we're going to talk about is innerlijke conflict, inner conflict. And that is very often the result of outer conflict, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So inner conflict is conflict wat in die gemoed van 'n karakter plaasvind. It's conflict that takes place inside the character's mind. It's stuff. It's sort of like, you know, that old saying, everybody's got something that they're dealing with. That is the inner conflict, and there's a lot of it. Fiela has it. What is she going to do? Is she going to hide Lucas, or is she going to... She's like, that's a bangdwa's uitkoms. I'm not going to do that. So she sort of has conflict about what to do with him. But the most sort of common example is when there's a bit of time in the courtroom when Benjamin/Lucas is left alone, and there's an opportunity to escape. He could escape and go back to Fiela, but his trommel is there, his trunk, and he doesn't want to leave the trommel, so he's conflicted. Should he escape and leave the trommel, or should he stay and not leave it and stay with the trommel? So that's that conflict. But now, uiterlike conflict is something that we see just as often, and that's conflict between 2 or more characters. We see that, and there's endless examples. For example, the conflicts between Lucas and Elias, when Elias is like trying to beat Lucas to a pulp. That's uiterlike conflict. That's a sort of outer conflict. Now, ruimte is also very important. So ruimte is the setting. Where does the story take place? there's basically three places. Then the first place is die Nysna Bos, which is the Nysna Forest. That's where the Van Rooyens live. Then we've got the Lange Kloof, Wolvekraal, where the Kumuchis live. Then we've got die See, which is where Benjamin sort of escapes to. Now, Ruimte and sort of time together make up milieu. So you might sometimes see the word milieu. It's basically ruimte en tyd together. It's a little bit it's a little bit more than that, but all you've basically really got to know is that it's ruimte and tyd will make up milieu. So now let's talk about the next thing, the tema, the themes. So the biggest theme, and they will sometimes ask, what is die tema? Van die drama. Biggest one is 'n mens se soek vir identiteit. If you only remember one, please, 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 I'm begging you, let it be this one. As 'n mens se soek vir identiteit, a person's search for identity. Benjamin / Lucas has to go on this whole search to find out whom he really is, because he knows that he's not, he now knows he's not a Van Rooyen. Bart has proven that. He also knows that he is not, yes, he's a Kumuti, but he's not a biological Kumuti. He knows that Fiela adopted him, and he wants to know what his origins are, and we never know what his origins are. If in the written book there's sort of a hint that he may be the child of one of the Lagans, because he turned up on Fiela's doorstep, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, and please, 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 please remember this. One of the things was Fiela's argument that he could not have come over the mountains was he turned up very neatly outside her door. He was beautifully, he was nicely dressed, he was clean, and he could not have had that if he came over the mountain. So please just remember that. Another one is society's way of dividing and stereotyping people by color. Die samelewing se manier om kleuronderskeid te tref en die genigtheid om volgens kleur te stereotypeer. That is a bit of a more complex one, but it's sort of like, it's a little bit of spice, a little bit of additional information. Another one, people's powerlessness. So Benjamin / Lucas, he had no say in what was happening to him. He just had to go along with it. Fiela, as a colored woman, had no say in having her kid taken away from her. But now the real important one, that I really, please, like, if it's the only one that you remember, please, it's 'n mens se soek vir identiteit. That is so important, because that is an easy mark right there. But the other one is buiterstanderskap, which is also another nice one. It's being an outsider. So Lucas, or Benjamin, is an outsider because he is, yes, he's accepted by the Kumutis, but we know he's not a Kumuti, really. He's white, they're colored. So he's an outsider from a race point of view there. He's an outsider with the Van Rooyens because he doesn't think he's really their kid. He never really fit in there. But then again, Nina is also an outsider because she believes in magic and all the wonders of the forest, and she's very different to the rest of her family. So they both are outsiders. But now let's talk about, now this is, I promise you, you have hung in so well, and you are going to do so well. I promise you're going to clap this test. What we're going to talk about now is something called die dramatische verloop. So that's basically how the story plays out, and that is done in a pyramid, and it's basically important events in the story. So the first one, and these are so important, if you remember only one thing about the important stuff, it's this bit, die dramatische verloop. So the first thing is die expositiegedeelte. Expositiegedeelte is basically like a character's monologue, them talking to the audience, and from that we hear more about the atmosphere in which they live, the background, the time period. A perfect example is when Fiela is telling everybody opband. Oh, by the way, if you see the words in the thing, obviously the words in italics are called toneelaanwysings. That shows like a time jump or what the actors must do on stage. But if you see the words opband, that means the character is speaking over the speakers and that the person on stage is not actually speaking. And that's also to give more information. So when Fiela is speaking opband about the Lange Kloof and where they find themselves and the conditions there, and the very first scene when Elias is talking about their house and how he wants to make money, that is exposition gedeelte, because that gives, it's like exposition, it gives the audience a little bit more information about what's going on, because obviously if we're not told stuff, we're not going to know anything. Then the motorische moment is basically when shit gets started. It's when the drama starts going. And this is the besoek van die census opnemers. That is the visit of the census people, because that's when things like, before that everything was sort of kind of hunky-dory. But now the drama starts to get started. Things start to get intense. That is the sort of motoric moment. That is the sort of, it gets the ball rolling, as it were. Then we've got the verwikkeling. That is basically, now, okay, now the drama has started. Now the story is building up. So that's when Benjamin gets taken away and Fiela tries to get him back. And that's basically, it's all those things in the development of the story. Elias beating Lucas up, and it's all of those sort of things. So that's the development. It's sort of the things that happen as time goes by. Then we've got the crisispunt. That's when things start to reach a head. When sort of stuff's about to hit the fan. Hasn't yet. So that is when Lucas asks Bartha, is ek Lucas of is ek nie? Because we're all like, oh, is he Lucas or is he not? Is he, who the hell is he? It's like a crisis because we don't know. We want to know. That is the whole premise of the story. We want to know who this boy is. So that's the crisis. Now, when stuff actually does hit the fan, is the climax. It's the climax of the story. That is when sort of tension is at its highest, and that is when Bartha admits the truth. You are not Lucas van Rooyen. I lied. You are somebody else's kid. Then we get the downhill. So that's all going uphill. And you know the old saying, whatever goes up must come down. Because now we've got the afloop. This sort of getting, the sort of calming down, the denotement, I think they call it in English. And that is when Lucas decides that he is going to be Benjamin. And then we get the einde when he's talking to John Ben and he says, no, I'm Benjamin Kumut. So this is the dramatische verloop, and it's so please important to know that. And basically, that is essentially all the important stuff for Fiela se kind. But if I just can say one or two more things, the really important things to know is details, names of stuff. This dramatische verloop, what is the theme? And as long as you've got the detail, the like names and the basic order in the way things happen, you sort of, so names, this dramatische verloop, you don't really need to sort of go into detail about things. You just, they're going to ask you, what is the climax? Then you're just going to say, wanneer Bartha die waarheid praat. Lucas is nie van Rooyen nie. Boom, 2 marks in the bag. So names, details like that, the dramatische verloop, and then you are sorted. You really are sorted. A lot of a lot of the questions in the notepad, they're going to ask again in the test, because there's only so much you can ask. And if you watch the movie, watch the 1988 version with Charlene Suti Richards, because that is the most accurate version. And then you are going to be absolutely fine. I promise you. And I'm right here if you need any help at all. And I'm so proud of you for sitting through nearly an hour and a half of my voice. You deserve a bloody Nobel Peace Prize. And if you need anything at all, you know where to find me. And you are going to absolutely clock that test. I promise, promise, promise you.